Hi everyone and welcome to the Leaders of Digital Learning 2021 event with Tablet Academy Scotland. My name is Heather Rhodes. I'm a music and music technology teacher at South Lanarkshire Council, and I'm here this morning to talk to you about feedback and assessment in Google Classroom. Many of you will be aware that obviously with this digital learning platform that you're using, whether it's Google Classroom or Microsoft Teams, there is that expectation, maybe at a higher level than has previously been, but to provide feedback and to still continue to monitor and assess pupils via these online digital learning platforms. I'm hoping that this morning I will be able to give you some handy hints and tips to try and alleviate some of that pressure that we might feel when we're talking about giving feedback and assessment via these online learning platforms. I have created some materials for you that I'm going to share with you. I'll pop them into the chat box. These are handy hints and tips and guides that you can share if you want to. You can use for your own personal use, or just to share widely or to disseminate to people who you think you'll find these tips useful. I've tried to break them down. I think there's 3 documents that I've created that breaks it down into each of the sections that I'm going to talk about today. The platform that I'm most familiar with is Google Classroom, and all the demonstrations that I'm going to do today will be based on Google Classroom and based on that learning platform. So without further ado, what I'm going to do is share my screen with you and talk you through some of those processes and procedure. But the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to share that link to the feedback and assessment for you. And if you give me 2 wee seconds, I will just pop that into the chat so that you can look through these documents at the same time as me, and then we can work through the documents together. Apologise in advance if there is any spelling mistakes. I did do them quite quickly. So in there for you is the link to the feedback and assessment forms that are in there. Again, if you are using the Glow platform, there's a potential that you might not be able to use the chat function. I can see the chat, so if there is any questions, please just pop them in there and I will either answer them as we go through or at the end if you do have any questions. Via the Glow platform, you might have to copy the URL into another tab in order to be able to access the chat feature or function. If not, what you can do is either wait till the 2:15 question and answer slot, where all of the presenters today will be available to have a live Q&A via YouTube, the chat feature in there. Or what you can do is you can tweet us at the LDL 2021 hashtag, or what you can do is you can follow me on, oops, that's not an @ sign, is follow me on Twitter, or send any messages via that platform. Again, if you need any email addresses or anything at the end, please feel free and I can pass those information on to you. So without further ado, what I'll do is I will share my screen and I'll talk you through some of the features and functions that I use to help minimise workload, but maximise the effectiveness of giving feedback to pupils in a variety of manners. So Google Classroom is obviously the main portal that we'll be using for today, and I've set up a dummy class with some examples that I can show you. So in that folder that I've also sent to you, in there should be some documents which I'm going to talk through. In that folder, the first one that I'm going to look through is I'm going to talk about the to-review. So if I pop that onto the screen so that you can see it, is I'm going to talk you through the to-review settings. And I feel that this is a setting that kind of tends to go overlooked by some teachers, but I find that it's a really useful way, maybe a bit demoralising in some cases, which I'll show you an example of what work has been allocated, what work has been marked, what's handed in, basically what is still to do within your Google Classrooms. So in Google Classroom, on your Classes tab at the very top, the To Review button is up above all the class cards. It's also in the menu Some people like to call that the burgers or the 3 lines menu that's up at the top. In there, your to review is also there. So either way accesses the same menu. This takes a wee while to load depending on how many classes you've got, but what it will display is every class that you're basically a teacher of. And in here, it will show you, for example, how many pieces of work don't have a due date, how many pieces of work are still in progress, and how much you've still got to review. So at the moment, with all my classes, these are the ones that are popping up for the ones that have been reviewed, the ones that I've ticked, the ones that I said, yep, I've done, yep, they're finished, I've reviewed those, they're okay and good to go. But under this to review, you can have a look at the amount of work that potentially still has to be done. So there's 621 pieces of work that have been allocated via Google Classrooms in some form or another that have got to be marked or have been completed. What's really nice is that you can filter this based on all your classes that you want to look at. So for example, I'm a teacher, obviously in my Google Classrooms, but I'm also a co-teacher in others. So for example, I don't teach advanced higher music, but in here, if I scroll down, there's the potential that I'm going to find some, advanced higher music topics, which I don't teach, therefore that's not my responsibility to mark and give feedback. So although there are 304 pieces of work in here, they're not all specific and relevant to me. So what might be quite a useful way to use is the all classes filter function, and then being able to see, for example, if I take my 3rd year music technology class, all the work that I've assigned them and what work that I still have to do or still have to provide feedback on. So I can see, for example, that straight off from here, from this page, I can see which or what assignments I have allocated pupils, and for example, how many have completed, how many still have to complete, and how many bits of work I have marked. Find this page really useful to be able to see all the assignments that have been allocated and then work through them systematically to say, for example, right, I've still got 15 bits of work to hand in for here and I've not marked any of them. That's maybe a good place for me to start. So if I click on this task here, I'm able to see all the information and then I can work it through there. The same, and it goes back to this page once you've clicked on it and you can go back and forward. And again, you can still continue to filter for a variety of different levels. So if I go into the College of Glen tutorial one, which is the one that I'm going to show you today, you can see that I've assigned one, I've not yet marked it or handed it back. And then through here, oh look, I've still got bits of work that potentially I could be marking and handing back to whoever's in that class. So that's the to review function. And that's a wee handy guide there that I've given out for you, which shows you where to access it and to use the filter function. Again, it's just a one-page document that's easy to show you with screenshots how to access those different sections. Second one I'm going to show you is going to be the comment bank and adding comments to pupil work. We obviously as educators know that we should be providing some sort of feedback to pupils. We do it on a regular basis when we're face-to-face. Now we're on this digital platform. As much as potentially the workload is going to be more, I still really think that it's important that the pupils who are putting in the effort to give us work gain some feedback back along the way, whether that's just a simple comment of, well done, you know, look at the next task for next time, or whether it's a really structured piece of work or a structured comment, for example, with pupils who are studying at qualification level and moving them forward and allowing them to advance in their learning. There's a variety of ways that we can do this. And way number one I'm going to do is once you've assigned somebody or a pupil a piece of work, and you're now going to provide them with comment back on the work that they've produced. So I'm going to show you some examples, show you how to do it, and then we'll move on to the next section. So in my Google Classroom, I've done some demo work for you. So in here, obviously you can see all my assignments along the way. So if I go into the classwork page and if I click on an assignment that I know that has definitely been handed in, this one here, so lesson 1, instruments of the orchestra, I can see that it's been returned, so I've marked it. So within here, obviously in the instructions and in the student work under the assignment, I can very briefly see that this pupil has been given feedback. I can see part of it in here. So what I can do is click on this pupil, and in the private comments section, that pupil has received work or have received feedback on the work that they've completed. 2 ways to do that. Way number 1 is to click on their name and click on the add private comment down the bottom. Or the way that I prefer is opening up whichever work that they have submitted and using the comments down the right-hand side and being able to add things into that comments while being able to see their work at the same time. This allows me, for example, to scroll down their document and say, right, it's questions 5 to 7 you didn't do so well on. So therefore that allows me to type really accurately into the private comment section. That private comment section is feedback directly between me and that pupil without anybody else being able to see any of the information. So I think that's a really great way to allow for personalised feedback that doesn't take particularly long because of that comment that's in there. Obviously, when I've completed this work, I haven't completed it to the best of my ability. So therefore, that's why my comments on here have been quite structured and quite lengthy in order to provide that pupil with feedback about how to support them in their learning. So I know, for example, that in this lesson starter 1, I need to look at note names. I've also identified a couple of extra things and some note values as the things that I need to work on. So I would be looking at the next task that I've assigned, hopefully that they've built upon those skills and built upon that feedback that I've provided that pupil with. So that's the private comment features. What you can also do within here, and can you see that on this document, this is a Google Doc that's been assigned to this pupil, that we have the option, for example, to write on this document and make suggestions. So within Google Docs, what it allows you to do is up in this top right-hand corner, you can see that there's a little green bubble. And whenever I open someone's document that's been handed in, it automatically goes to what we call the suggesting mode. This suggesting mode allows me to write on my document or this pupil's document without editing it. So, for example, say this was a paragraph of text, take an English lesson, for example, or a story that you've asked pupils to write about. In that document, for example, when they hand it to you in paper form, the chances of you getting a pen or a pencil and annotating into certain areas, for example, changing the letter T, for example, at the beginning of a sentence to a capital letter, halfway through putting in a comma, for example, potentially they've missed out a word, so you put the wee arrow at the top and then write the word above. This suggesting mode allows you to do exactly that in a digital version, which I think is fantastic. It means that the suggestions, if you look at the document, will pop up onto the right-hand side, and these pupils, or the pupil will get this document back with these suggestions in it, and they will be allowed to, for example, accept the suggestion or reject the suggestion. So, for example, if you said, here's an alternative sentence starter, and then, for example, scored out and said, this is what I think you should do, the pupil will either decide, do you know something? No, I like my sentence starter. I like the way that I've started that. So they might, for example, reject your suggestion. However, halfway down, especially when they've kind of gone, not too sure what to write about here, when you've put the answer, for example, they might go, right, okay, well, that's right. So I'll make that suggestion. And what will happen is you will get an email that says, for example, whoever's document it is, has accepted or rejected, and the list of suggestions that you've had put into their document, and it comes to you in one email. So that function is available on Google Docs. It's the only one it's available on, and it's up under the top right-hand corner for suggesting mode, and anything you type in will appear in green. So for example, I know this is obviously the question at the top. I can highlight it, for example, and just push delete on my keyboard, and it'll put a line straight through it, and then it'll come up on the left-hand side, delete. If I wanted to add anything to this, for example, I've pushed space on my keyboard, so it's now telling me that I've added a space. And what I can now do, for example, is add something else into this. For example, please look at the comments that I have made for you on the right-hand side. And what it will do is it will now come up on the right-hand side and say, replace. So it's now not deleting, it's saying we're going to take out that sentence and replace it with, and then it's put it in italics. What you can also do in this comment box here is you can reply. So you can have a conversation with that pupil underneath if you want to say, could we have a chat about this, for example, or could you look at the document that we assigned last week in class when we were talking about sentence starters, something along those lines. And what you can do is use the @ sign on your keyboard. It will then drop down with a list of suggestions. And if I just type in, for example, this document belongs to me. So in here, I've got my email address. And what will happen is it now says your @ mention will add people this discussion and send them an email. So for example, if this was a piece of, for example, qualification level work that was to do with a folio, to do with submissions, there's the potential that you could tag the pupil in it. It will then prompt them with an email to say, I've given you feedback and this is the comment that I've suggested. And you can do that with every comment. You can do it with just a couple if you wanted, but that's another way that you can provide feedback to learners using that comment button. And if I click reply, I will now get an email notification with that to say that I've added a comment onto my document. I'm just waiting to see if that email pops through my phone so that I can show you, but it doesn't look so at the moment. If it pops through, I'll show you. So that will now say that that document there has a comment from me on, and then I can click on it and it'll take me to my document. Again, up here, you also have the editing mode. Again, this will allow you to edit the document directly. The pupil will not be able to see the changes, though. When they open the document back up, they won't know what you've changed. It won't be completely obvious like it has in the suggesting mode. And then in viewing mode, it just shows you what the document looks like, what that pupil has submitted, what information is there. So that's a couple of ways that you can give feedback, is using that suggesting and that editing mode in here. What's another feature that's quite nice, and I'll show you this in this Google Doc here, and I'll also show you in the slides assignments that I've also put up for pupils, is that you're able to see the progress that pupils have made throughout a task, for example, using the version history side of things. So if I use this little arrow, so it's a little downward arrow, it's on the very right-hand side, and some people tend to miss this. Google Docs tends to only give you the bar at the top. It doesn't tend to give you any more information because it doesn't want to clog up your screen. But this drop-down menu will now allow you to see what a Google Doc would normally look like. So you've got all your other options at the top, for example. So if you had an add-on that you wanted to, activate in here, that you could click on your add-on, get your add-on from there. Or, for example, if you wanted to add different types of text or use the word count, for example, the features and functions are still in there. You can still use those. They're just hidden. But what you can also do here in your tracking and monitoring things is go to File, down to Version History, and then see Version History. So you'll be able to see, for example, when changes and things have been made. Now, I've noticed that regarding engagement, we've also got a really strict and stringent engagement policy at present to monitor the pupils that are submitting work, and then obviously putting in interventions for those who maybe are disengaging or maybe are struggling. But what we can do in here, and I've noticed this, obviously I can't show you a pupil's work because of GDPR, but what I can do in here is I can see when a pupil has started something and when a pupil has finished. One thing that I have noticed is that pupils do tend to start something but don't tend to finish it. And another fantastic feature about the Google products is whatever work they do will save, and you'll be able to see that. I noticed that one pupil, for example, had started the task on the 22nd of January, had then gone in and completed it on the 25th of February and handed it in, 25th of January, sorry, and handed it in. And then I went and gave them feedback back on the 4th of February. So I was able to see that journey that pupil went on, and then when I went back and handed it back to them. This document here, you can obviously see that on the 14th of February, I assigned it. So that was the task in there. Then 20 odd minutes or so later, 25 minutes or so later, the instructions then were placed and then the task was completed. And then, for example, what I've done today is I've then, for example, deleted, and if I hover over it, it's saying that I suggested to make this change. Again, in version history, it doesn't have to be in Google Classroom. This could be in your Google Drive. In a Google Doc, for example, you have the different versions. What you can do is rename the versions, for example, to say this is, final draft 2 or, completed work or something like that if you want to do that. And also what you can do is restore the versions if something happens or something goes wonky. I know that definitely when I was speaking to some English teachers about this, pupils tend to go off. They'll do part of an essay or whatever, and then they'll go off on a tangent about something else that's totally unrelated. And what you can do is bring them back to that instead of them having to work out a way to get that message to fit in. There's a potential that sometimes it's just going, let's just delete what I've done, let's go back, and being able to restore that version history for whatever reason is a good way to do that in Google Docs, Sheets or Slides. I know we've previously put up documents, for example, with class lists. Somebody's tried to make or forgotten to make their own copy and is then written over. And again, the version history would be good to do something like that. But version history to track monitoring engagement, to track level of knowledge and understanding along the way. I've used it before just to see how pupils have done, just out of curiosity, and then obviously found that somebody started 22nd, completed 25th, and then feedback handed back on the 4th. So again, if I just go back to, that's the little arrow on the very right hand side, and then file and version history, and the version history is in there for you. Couple of extra tips. This tends to go unnoticed a little bit, I think, and when I've suggested it to teachers, they're like, oh, is that there? So if you notice, private comments bit is the bit that always pops up, but also if you notice here, it tells me that my file was handed in yesterday, 14th of February, 12:55, and if I click here, see history, what I can see is when it was assigned, when it was handed in, and then when it was marked and returned. I'm going to give you an example of this in a wee minute or two with changes that I've added to a document, and you're able to track and monitor that process along the way. But it also allows you to see, for example, how close between timings, or how long did this task take somebody to do, or when did they hand it in. So for example, I know we're supposed to be following our timetables as we would normally in class, but pupils won't submit, if they're supposed to be with me between 9 and 10:30, they won't submit work between 9 and 10:30 for whatever reason, and that's where the asynchronous part comes in. There's a potential that they'll complete that at 4 o'clock in the afternoon on whatever day, just because that's the time that suits them. So it's nice to see what time and things people are submitting things, and obviously what time and stuff we're handing stuff back at. So that's again on the files bit, on the private comments section, and then up under see history. And again, if there's more than one file attached, they'll also appear in here, and you can also open them from your drive or open them in a new window if you'd like to. However, on this left-hand side, we've obviously got the grading tool here, which pops up with this private comments and any grades that we're potentially going to be adding in here. but there's this little icon underneath, which is your comment bank. This comment bank has been a lifesaver. At present, we have a full first year class and a full second year class. We haven't split them up into individual groupings. So there's over 200 pupils in those Google Classrooms. So usually it tends to be, I know we're giving feedback, I know we're giving meaningful feedback, but some of the times you're just like, that's the same comment that I'm needing to give them back, especially for pupils who submit work and there's nothing attached. So the same comment would go back to those pupils, for example, and what you can use is the comment bank here. So the comment bank here, you can add different types of comments to. So for example, it might be hi, and you could just leave a couple of spaces. There appears to be no work attached. Could you please go back and add your attachment? Thanks, Miss Rhodes. And what will happen is once I click this, it will now appear in my comment bank. And what I can do is at the bottom right-hand corner, I've now got that copy to clipboard. So what I can do is use that copy to clipboard, go back to my grading tool and add that in a private comment, and it just appears. So I can write, this is my work. So all I've done is left a space for the name, post it, and it goes back to that pupil. And that's just using the comment bank. I've also noticed this comment bank will appear in any piece of work, for example, but I tend to have, for example, like a no work example, one that's really good. I've obviously added in here, which I'll show you in a wee second, is a definition to a musical concept that tends to, whether it's third or fourth year for my classes, tends to be one that I always need to go back to. And then obviously just some generic kind of really small comments that I've noticed that people were missing out this listening piece at the end of a topic. So you can add a variety of different comments into that. And if you've got lots, you can use the search button for whatever feature there's there. You can also add these comments, for example, into the document. For example, say down the bottom, the word was give an explanation for VAMP. I could then copy here and then obviously paste it in. And because it's in suggesting mode, it's adding it to the the right hand side. So I can use those comment banks along the way. A couple of extra things you can do in the document. I can highlight bits of text, for example, and then I can add. So see this little button up here, for example, add. In here, what I can do is that piece of text, for example, could be please add in some extra examples, and then click comment. And what people will now see is that piece of text that's highlighted, and then this little comment here at the end, and they can click resolve, or they can have a discussion with me to say, I don't really understand what this is to do, or adding something in, or what other examples are you looking for? And you can have a comment bank based that way. So you've got the suggesting mode, which obviously you can change answers and things like that. But in here, for example, if this was a report, you might want to add a comment that says, great information, but could we have a demonstration, or could we have a picture that explains this feature or this function? So that's more or less all the features. I will show you a couple of extra things on the way. So if I go back to my Google Classroom and I go back to all the assignments, there's a couple, I think, for example, here, in these ones here, that I'm going to show you how to add a couple of extra things in. So these are slides. So the task that I've assigned pupils is a Google Slide task. And in the Google Slides task, what I've asked them to do is I've asked them to listen to the excerpts in the previous slide and to write their answers into the grid. Now, if you notice, again, the top right-hand corner, there's no suggesting or editing mode in here. So what this will do is if I write onto this document, it's going to change whatever the pupil's written. So in regard to that, what I tend to like, especially if it's a slides task, is I probably won't give them any written. So I probably wouldn't change this, for example, to woodwind. I wouldn't change it. What I would do instead is just mark it right or wrong. Another great feature that you can use in here is the add image function, which again you can do in Google Docs as well. And in here what you can do is, if you click on the image search, in here what you can do is actually search for pictures from the internet within the Google slide. You don't have to go anywhere else. You don't have to open up a new tab and do it that way. You can open up straight from in here. So if I search, for example, the internet, and I search for, it needs to be a tick mark, otherwise you'll get that little index. And I click on, for example, the tick mark and click select. What will happen is that tick mark now appears in my document. Now it's huge. But what you can do is you can resize that to fit wherever you want it. So what I would just do is use the keyboard shortcuts, Control V, Control C for copy, Control V for paste, and then give them their feedback that way, which is also another visual aspect to give feedback. And then if something was wrong, again, cross mark. Just resize to whatever size you're looking for, and then provide feedback. And then I would just copy and paste this one, Control C, Control V, whatever I needed to do into here. There you go. So my mark is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 out of 12. So I can put my mark in here. It will end up as a draft. And then private comments, again, I'm going to go back to my comment bank. Well done, just a few mistakes. Sounds about right. Copy, grading, private comments, paste, change name, post, and return. And that's my piece of work graded and marked back. And it shouldn't have taken that much longer. Okay, yes, there's the potential that the ticking and the crossing per each document might take a little bit longer, but with that in mind, you can add those different pictures in. So say there was, for example, I don't know, say we're doing a task on geography, and the person was talking about somewhere completely random. What you could do is say, you know, this is the place that you're looking at, or this is the picture or stimulus that I'd like you to talk about, or giving them visual cues using the built-in image function. And again, you can use that not just in Google Classroom, but on any Google Doc or any Google Slides. Along the way, you can use those features and functions. It's also built into forms as well. So that's really your adding comments features down the left-hand side. Obviously, providing feedback, that's probably the most common way that most of us will do this, to provide private comments via the assignments if we've assigned something. Obviously, the other way that we can provide feedback is by using the stream and using the announce something to your class at the top, and then obviously selecting which students in your class that you would like this, for example, message to go to. We did a class test, for example, and one of my pupils was at college on the day that they were getting the results. Obviously, it was a paper copy, so I didn't add an assignment, for example, to Google Classroom. But what I did instead was sent him a private message or a message via the stream just to him to let him know what his mark was. And that was a secure way in order to provide him feedback that only went to him, but was still via this communication channel of using Google Classroom. You really just need to know which version of comments and which pathway of communication would be best to provide feedback, and obviously using the assessment tab up in classwork and providing them with the assessment that's relevant to them will allow them to be able to really know which learning parts and feedback that they're getting and how that's going to be communicated back to those pupils. There's a, oops, that's the wrong one, sorry. And then the last bit that I'm going to talk about, which is also in here for you, is the activity dashboard. So if I just go through these, we've gone through the to review, we've gone through the suggesting mode, which is up in the top corner, what suggesting mode does, then adding comments, version history to review changes. That document is all there for you, and then obviously restoring version history, and then obviously finding out when people and stuff have handed stuff back. If I show you a really quick example of being able to double check, or if someone's handed something in and then handed it back to you, this one, for example, I think was returned. So see history. Yep. So you can see that it was assigned yesterday. It was handed in today. I gave them feedback within a minute. It was then handed back in with more information, and then I've returned it back. So you can see that procedure, especially if it was going to be a document, for example, like an essay, that you'd be able to see the changes along the way and when things have been given feedback and handed back in, etc. And again, if you check the version history for this document, version history, you'll be able to see what's happened and what's happened when. And if I break that down, for example, that today the document looked like this before, and then I've suggested that was my comment and my feedback. You've only included some of the information, like you to go back and look at it. The pupil's then gone back, added in more information like this, and then that's the information that's been given back and then handed back. But you can see the level of engagement. For example, it's gone from this very, very, very basic piece of information, probably just to tick a box to say task has been completed, all the way through to this level of engagement, which you can now see the pupils actually sat down and going, right, what do I know about this? But you can also, in that sense, be able to see, well, they have known or very little knowledge, understanding. How did they get to that? And then you can start questioning, obviously, their learning. Is that copied and pasted from somewhere, for example? But you'll be able to see the basically tracking and monitoring of a pupil's progress by using the version history. And you can see there's been 12 edits on this document alone, so you're able to see how many times this has been edited along the way. So that's all in that document there for you. We've done the to review, the comment bank and adding comments we've done, again, using the right-hand side. Adding comments we've done when you highlight a piece of text, giving them either a tag, for example, with the @ sign, and then dropping their email address in. What you can also do is add a comment to the bank, for example, using that one there. The comment banks that are there and how to edit a comment bank. The last one is the activity dashboard. So what the activity dashboard will do is show you, for example, on a document or whenever, that whoever's looked at your document and when. This is quite interesting, especially if this is a task that you've assigned, for example, the full class, and the full class have to collaborate on something, or a teamwork task, for example. The activity dashboard will allow you to see who's accessed your document and when, and how many times, for example, that document's been viewed. I'm trying to think of an example that I can use to show you this. If I even just use this one, for example. So again, menu bar is not visible, but if you go to the very right-hand side and open the menu one, it's this one here that I kind of think it looks like the stocks and shares sign. That little squiggly arrow in there. What you're able to see is you're able to see who's viewed your document. You're able to see the trends of your document as well. What comments have happened to the document and when. And then obviously like the sharing settings of who shared this document. If permission things have been shared and you want to know who changed what and who gave who access, you're able to see that in the activity dashboard as well. This isn't loading particularly well, so if you give me 2 wee seconds, I will find an example for you to show you the activity dashboard in a document that doesn't have any pupil details. But I found this really interesting. We've done a couple of one-to-one sessions with pupils. And along the way, sometimes it's quite interesting to see who's accessed this document and when. If I take, for example, something that we did at the moderation meeting, we created a higher music technology moderation marking grid. And in here, what I should be able to see is anybody who's got access to this document using that document or activity dashboard, you can see who's seen it and when. And what I can do is also send them an email if I wanted to. So for example, I've obviously viewed it in the last hour. Gary viewed it this morning. Ian viewed it on Friday. But these people down the bottom who've got a little dash next to it haven't viewed this at all. And what you can do is see, obviously, when they've viewed it. So if I go back to somebody, for example, then you can see who's viewed it when. You can also see that on the 10th of February there were 7 viewers. On the 11th of February there was 4, etc. And you can see the comment trend as you go. There's obviously been no comments added to this document. At the moment there's no sharing settings. This is in a group of 63 music teachers. So I can manage the settings from here if I want to, and then obviously change the settings is there. So that's just another feature that's built into Google Docs, Google Sheets and Google Slides, is that activity dashboard. And I think that gives a nice overview, especially if you've got like a group task, you'll be able to see who's accessed the document and when, and what information, etc. is there. The last thing that I'll talk about, which again I'm maybe taking for granted a little bit, is the Marks tab. I find the Marks tab a fantastic resource in Google Classroom, and what it allows me to see is basically an overall view of every task that's been assigned. It gives me their information about their marks, what was the task out of, how many marks and things have been allocated. And again, I can update this form from here if, for example, I'd previously marked things when we'd done a class, a setting in class or whatever, and I'd written them down on paper. I can go in and edit them through the marks. Doesn't matter what assignment you click on either, but what you can do is in the top right-hand corner is the settings cog, and you can download all of the information for every assignment across the full year. You can copy and download all of those marks into Google Sheet, which obviously you can then track and monitor using your Google Sheet skills and filter and modify and change anything, delete columns. You can do all of that information within this Google Sheets. I'll just show you that again. So click on an assignment, any assignment, top right-hand corner, the wee settings cog, and then you can download all marks to a CSV's a comma separated values chart, I think, or just a Google Sheet form which automatically saves into your Google Drive, and to do it that way. Last way that I'm going to show you is using the People tab. So in the People tab, obviously all of your pupils will be displayed, especially when we are asked to fill out tracking and monitoring forms. I found it quite hard to monitor with when I've got like task 1, task 2, task 3, task 4, especially as the online learning weeks go on. Do find it really hard to kind of keep on top of who's completed what. So I've tended to go to the People tab instead, select the pupil which you're looking at, and this will show me, for example, what tasks have been assigned, what tasks have been handed in, still what ones have I still to mark, for example, and what tasks are still to be completed. So that's the way that I've tended to track and monitor pupils on an individual basis along the way, and I found that a more manageable way to track and monitor the pupils using the People tab in Google Classroom. I'm very aware that that's obviously been a pretty much whistle-stop tour of Google Classroom and the tracking and monitoring features that are available to you. There are obviously a mountain of ways in which to track and monitor pupil engagement and provide feedback to them. But I think the way, for example, to use the private comment section to give them personalised feedback on their work, using the comment bank to add comments to and reuse readily I think is a time saver for teachers, and I'd highly recommend that you use those either for the private comment function or for comments anywhere on documents, etc., especially with common mistakes. It will allow you to be able to access those ones. You also have, for example, the stream. If you want to communicate with pupils to provide feedback, you can select groups of individuals to provide feedback to, or you can also, for example, select groups or individuals as well. You've got the marks tab, you've got the people tab as well, and you've obviously got the different types of classwork and assignment posts that you can switch between to provide different types of tasks to generate different types of evidence for pupils. Those documents I'm more than welcome for you to use, to share, to do whatever you'd like with. They are there for complete dissemination at your leisure. I hope you do all have access to those. I'm hoping that link that I've sent you should work. That's obviously a whistle-stop tour of everything that I can think of at the moment to kind of cut down workload and to increase feedback and engagement and monitor and track pupils within Google Classroom. There are obviously a lot more ways, for example, the use of Mote, which I think Carla is doing Carla did, sorry, at 9:30. There's also the use of rubrics to track and monitor as well, which Carla again is doing a session at 1:30 on those as well. I really hope that you've gained something from today's session. I know that there's an awful lot of things to choose from, and you will be able, for example, to re-watch this session at a later date. Again, in the chat box at the very start of the session, I've put in, if you wouldn't mind tweeting, if you've got Twitter, to tweet the LDL 2021 hashtag and even to tag Tablet Academy Scotland in it. And my Twitter handle is also there if you want to ask any more questions or gain any more information. I'm more than happy to answer anything you have. There will also be a question and answer session, I think at 2:15, if you want to ask the panel at any point for any feedback or for any advice on anything that's been covered today. That's all I have in regard to my session today. Again, I hope that you have a lovely afternoon, and I hope that you do enjoy some of the sessions that we are putting on this afternoon for you to pick and choose from in this CPD event. Thank you very much for joining me this morning. I hope you've managed to take away a few tips and tricks. See you later.